Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I know you'll be really glad you did because our speaker has a great presentation for you today. Wonderful content, terrific handouts. So, this is a great opportunity for us at the Center for Financial Social Work to provide this great speaker and wonderful information. And so, let's go ahead. Marisa, you want to say a quick hello until I get to introduce you later?
Hi, everyone. I'm Marisa Garwacki. Nice to be here today. I'm really excited to present.
All right, thanks, Marissa. For those of you who are new to our free monthly webinars, I am just going to tell you a little bit about financial social work so you know why we do this every month. And again, this month the topic is economic abuse, a hidden form of domestic violence. And I'm proud to say that Marissa is a graduate of the Center for Financial Social Work. And in her essay, she wrote about the financial and economic aspects of domestic violence. And I said, please, can you share this with our community? And she was kind enough to agree to do that. So, some of the most commonly asked questions right before we get started is that slides aren't shared, they are proprietary, they take a great deal of research and work. But the recording will be on our website, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel next week. And those of you who registered will receive it by email. So you have all the time you need or want to go through all the slides. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions, you can put them in the question box and we will answer as many as time permits at the end. Marissa does have a lot of wonderful information, so we want her to get through that, and we can stay a little bit longer if there's questions we need to answer. And if you have any technical problems, please go to this link. Vonda isn't here with me, my assistant right now. She will be in later, so she can help you through the chat box also. So we are going to start with a poll today. This poll doesn't have anything specific to do with the Marissa's webinar, but it does have to do with a special announcement at the end of the program. So I thought we would just get started with it and see. The poll is open and you can see what is your biggest frustration with financial wellness work with clients. And you can also see that you can pick any that are appropriate. Now, Marissa has a bunch of polls. We love doing polls and getting you involved and engaged. And I've told her that we have great audiences that always participate. So I'm looking forward to having wonderful participation. So over 50% of you have voted. Obviously, this is anonymous, and we usually can get to 70 or 80%, but go ahead and if you haven't voted, do your vote, and then I'm going to close it. I'll count down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, 80%. Thanks, everybody. And I'm going to share it with you. Let's see. So, not enough time and difficult to engage my clients, right? Yes, actually, I was interested because these are the types of responses we hear every day. And so I'm kind of excited to share with you my announcement a little later. So I'm going to close that and just go on and tell you rather quickly and simply a little bit about financial social work because we believe very strongly that financial health is about so much more than dollars, cents, budgets, um, there's, or debt. We need to add the word debt there because it is. See, this is our whole person financial health model, and it demonstrates there is a lot going on when it comes to money. So, those of you who feel you could use more information or want to know how to deal with client resistance, it isn't because of the dollar sense debt and budgets. We have that whole self component where you are in the life cycle, the other people in your circle, your communities. It is definitely about financial behavior and how that impacts financial health. And society plays a huge role. So that's kind of what we're about. We believe in our financial wellness model that is the client's relationship and our own relationship also with money and self that drives clients' financial behavior. And financial behavior for me is how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. That's a major piece that we focus on. And you'll hear it one or two more times. So I hope that by the time we finish, you will be very clear on that. So it is that financial behavior that drives or determines a client's financial circumstances. So where my little dancing arrow was, that's where financial behavioral change happens. So it is about self-respect, self-esteem, self-worth. No one is going to take the time or make the effort if they don't feel good about themselves. And we said financial behavior is how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. And this is a quick overview of the financial social work model. It is an ongoing model that incorporates ongoing education, motivation, validation, support, hope, help, healing, and wellness. It's very experiential, it's strength-based, it's introspective, and it works with individuals and with groups. So dollars and cents don't make our financial choices. It's our inner money self. And we all have an inner money self, and I encourage you to connect with yours because that's where financial circumstances originate from within the inner money self. That's the psychosocial component. It includes your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your beliefs with your money and with yourself. Money's not the problem, it's our relation with it that is. So we use a transformational learning and transitional model of behavioral change, and that's our psychodynamic financial social work model. These are pieces that really help clients to change their lives. And my final slide, this is the goal of financial social work. We love helping everyone, our students, our graduates, our community, and our clients to make peace with their money. So now let's turn this over to Marisa. So I will make her the organizer, and she will tell you about her work, her where and what she does, and she will share with you some really terrific information. There you go, Marisa. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Rita. I appreciate that. So, just first, I'll start with just what I do. So my name is Marisa. I've been in the field of domestic and sexual violence advocacy for over 14 years now, and I serve as coordinator of the Domestic Violence Services Unit here at the Center for Family Justice. We're located in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I oversee a team of advocates here. We provide free and confidential services to victims of abuse. I also created and now coordinate our Rise and Thrive self-sufficiency program, which is a program that combines education, trauma-informed counseling, and some emotional wellness practices to support survivors on their path towards economic empowerment. I recently became a certified financial social worker, as Rita was saying, through the Center for Financial Social Work. And I really believe that financial social work really could be a powerful tool for abuse victims, specifically because economic abuse victims um, and domestic violence victims in general, their choices are very limited when they're dealing with abuse. And we as victim advocates aim to increase the victim's choices. And this is one of sort of the key tenets of financial social work is when you increase a victim's choice and create more options, you increase their likelihood of becoming financially self-sufficient. So I really, truly believe that this model can be a great model to look into if you're working with financial abuse victims in general. So let's get started with a poll just to kind of see who our audience is today. I'm just going to go to the quick poll slide, which is, so is this information for you or for those you serve? So there's several options. Hold on, I'm watching it. So it's either for me, I want to learn more about economic abuse for yourself or for those you serve, if you're a professional that works in the financial field or social work field that wants this information for your clients, or both if you want information for yourself and for others. So we'll just kind of see what our audience is. And while we're waiting, it's important to note that when I'm talking about this topic, I may switch between the terms victim and survivor in my terminology. It basically means the same thing. They're really interchangeable. And I also may switch between economic abuse and financial abuse, but that essentially means the same thing. The term economic abuse is a little bit broader, but I might also say financial abuse as well. And I try to avoid gendered pronouns such as he or she because abuse really occurs across all genders. But I may slip into she to describe the victim from time to time and he to describe the abuser. And that's only because a large majority of the clients that we see are female victims, typically with a male abuser, because a lot of the relationships are IPV, which is intimate partner violence. So, but I will definitely try to avoid that because, of course, it happens across all genders. And it looks like we're at 81%, which is great.
Whoa, yeah.
So I think, should
Yeah,
we close? Do
sure.
we close the poll?
Yeah.
All right, okay. So it looks like a lot of you said both, and most of you said for those that you serve. So a lot of professionals here today, or a lot of people looking for information to share with your clients. So this presentation is really geared more towards professionals working with clients, but it's certainly the information can apply to yourself as well, and just kind of those in your personal life. All right, so the next slide. So what is domestic violence? So we're just going to do this for a little bit of context, a background on domestic violence in general. So domestic violence is a pattern of abusive and coercive controlling behavior, and these behaviors are intentional with the purpose of gaining and maintaining power and control over another person. Domestic violence is sometimes referred to as intimate partner violence. We call it IPV when the violence occurs between current or former spouses or current or former dating partners or individuals who have a child together. So on the bottom, it lists the elements of domestic violence that are actually crimes that offenders can get arrested for in most states. So assaulting, threatening, harassing, strangling, stalking, or intimate partner crimes. These are crimes in most states, including here in Connecticut, but there are several forms of abuse not recognized by the law, and we're going to go over them really briefly. So some of the methods of control, and these are just some of the types of abuse. So most people, when you think of physical abuse, or domestic violence, the most obvious form is physical abuse, and that most commonly comes to mind: hitting, pushing, slapping, restraining, or choking. Sexual abuse includes any non-consensual sex act or violence. purposely transmitting STIs onto another person, or using date rape drugs. Emotional and psychological abuse includes public or private name calling or put downs, exhibiting extreme jealousy, isolating the victims from family and friends, and any threats that they may make to intimidate the victim. And then stalking or harassment is another form of abuse. That's where one partner is constantly calling to check up on the victim, showing up at the victim's home or place of work uninvited, sending unwanted gifts, having the victim followed, all of those kinds of things. And it's usually, most of these, again, are usually patterns. So it's usually an ongoing pattern that kind of gets worse over time. It's not usually a one-time thing. One-time thing. Technology abuse, we went too far. So technology abuse is excessive texting, and we see this more in today's world, and especially with youth and dating violence. We see this a lot. Abusers will use technology to sort of control their victims with excessive texting, following the victim or tracking them through GPS monitoring, and are controlling their social media accounts. It's very easy to download malware or spyware onto a victim's phone or home computer, especially if you live with them, and kind of track everything that they're doing. So it's it's just very simple to use, very cheap and inexpensive for abuser to set up. So finally, we're going to go over, and this is the main topic, is financial abuse. So, and we will focus on that and explore this in more detail today. So what is financial abuse? So financial or economic abuse, which we'll focus on today, is a pattern of abuse that involves using multiple methods, including maintaining control over financial resources, employment-related abuse, and coerced debt, all in an effort to create financial dependence as a means of control. So there's the main three types of abuse that is used is the control of the financial resources, the employment-related abuse, and the coerced debt, which we'll go into in detail. But it's, all about creating control, creating the financial dependence. All right. So financial abuse is really unique in that, on one hand, it's one of the more covert or hidden forms of abuse that often goes undetected, right under our noses. And yet it can have the most far-reaching impact on the lives of its victims. So, for example, it's hidden, and that's quietly happening all around us, in our neighborhoods, in our communities. Most of you probably know someone whose lives have been impacted by financial abuse and have absolutely no idea. So it's very common. Little is known or written on the topic of relational financial abuse. And because of this lack of knowledge, abusers are able to go unchallenged and undetected. And this is what abusers bank on, this silence and compliance. It also knows no boundaries, and that it occurs across all demographics and financial income brackets. Women and men are both targets of financial harm. Even children can become casualties of this, so it's far-reaching. And it's devastating in that its destruction and daily impact on the lives of its victims lasts really years after the relationship is even over. So many survivors have shared with me that years after the abuse has ended, the financial damage remains. Financial control is one of the injuries on the psychological abuse spectrum that really takes the longest to heal. And we're going to go into why that is at a later point in the presentation. So I have this slide just to kind of illustrate that because of the tools economic abusers have at their disposal, victims and survivors are often forced to choose between staying in abusive relationships where they're controlled daily, or leaving the abusive relationship and potentially facing poverty and in many cases homelessness. So there's really no choice there. It's a dead end for abuse victims, and many victims choose to stay in abusive or toxic relationships for this very reason. So it's really an impossible choice for a lot of victims to make. So we're going to go into some of the methods of control when it comes to economic abuse. And like I said, there are the three primary forms, which is employment-related abuse, preventing access to funds, and coerced debt, and we're going to review those. So employment-related abuse prevents the victim from earning money by preventing them from going to work or school. So abusers do this in a variety of ways. So for example, they'll sabotage your transportation, hide car keys right before you need to leave for work, sabotaging childcare. They might have a meltdown or cause an argument right before you have to leave the house, so these types of things. They might sabotage a victim's employment through spreading rumors about them with their coworkers or their supervisors. They might call and trash the victim to their boss or coworkers. So we've seen this in a lot of cases. They interfere with the victim's work performance through harassing activities like frequent phone calls or showing up at the job unannounced. They may demand that the victim quits their job for a variety of reasons, all of which are just excuses to kind of perpetuate their control over the victim. They may prevent the victim from looking for jobs or attending job interviews. And an abuser can also prevent victims from accessing existing funds. So it goes into the right side of the screen. So they do this by deciding when and how the victim can use cash, bank accounts, or credit or debit cards. So for example, a client of mine once described an instance where her abuser would withhold money or an allowance unless she gave him what he wanted. So he would give her an allowance every week, but she had to do exactly what he wanted at that time. So it could be housework or chores, it could be sex, really anything he wanted at the time, she would have to do, or she would not be allowed any money for gas or food or anything. So it's just kind of they're controlling everything and deciding when and how a victim can use the money. They also force the victim to give the abuser money, so like ATM cards or credit cards. So for example, if the victim works and the abuser does not, we see this happen a lot actually, where there is still financial control, and a lot of people wouldn't think that. They would think, oh, whoever has the money, they're the ones that are in control, and that's not true. A lot of abusers will force their victims to work while they sit at home and just collect all the money and take all the money from their paycheck. So this happens as well. Another thing they could do is demand that the lease or mortgage or assets be in the abuser's name, and they might say it's for a variety of different reasons. Again, those are all excuses. It's really just so that they could have the control over everything. They might use a victim's checkbook, ATM card, or credit or debit cards without the victim's knowledge, and they prevent the victim's access to bank accounts. And this could be covert, so they may not outright refuse to allow the victim access, but rather they might set up barriers or create excuses that prevent the victim from accessing the accounts. Oh, it's not the right time, or oh, I didn't set up the online profile yet, or oh, I still have to make it a joint account and I never did, or there's always excuses, and oh, I do all the banking anyway, you don't need to worry about it. So there's always, it's usually a little bit more covert. It's not just you can't access the bank account. That's rare. So we're going to go into coerced debt, which is one of the more devastating forms of financial abuse. And this really refers to non-consensual credit-related transactions in the context of an abusive relationship. So coerced debt can destroy the victim's credit rating, making it difficult for them to obtain future loans, rent an apartment, and even get a job. So your credit rating sort of controls every aspect of your life, really. So once that's destroyed, it's really hard to become self-sufficient again. Coerced debt includes applying for credit cards, obtaining loans, or opening other financial accounts in the victim's name, forcing the victim to obtain loans, forcing the victim to sign financial documents that they don't want to sign, and they may use threats or physical force to convince the victims to make credit-related transactions. they force them to refinance a home mortgage or a car loan they might do this without the victim's knowledge as well. And if the victim is on all these, on the mortgage and the car loans, then it's also the victim's debt. So other forms of economic abuse include intentionally withholding basic needs and necessities like food, clothing, shelter, personal hygiene products, medication, things like that. They may steal or destroy the victim's belongings. The victim, they require justification for any money spent, and they may punish the victim with another form of abuse like physical, sexual, or emotional abuse if they spend money. So far, and then sorry, I forgot to go into one part that I forgot. So abusers of the courts and legal system, abusers will often use the court and legal system as another form of financial control. So, for example, and we see this a lot now, for example, abusers will refuse to pay court-ordered child support or spousal support, and they may repeatedly file costly lawsuits in an effort to bankrupt the victim. This is really common once victims choose to leave an abusive relationship, and because this is the one way that the abuser knows that they can ensure control even after the victim has tried to break free. And the court system, unfortunately, is not really set up for victims, so a lot of abusers end up being successful in these attempts to, and they use the courts to kind of keep this financial manipulation and control going. So we're going to go into a poll before we get into the statistics. And we just wanted to get an idea of where everyone's head's at, in terms of the prevalence of financial abuse. So we will launch this. So you check off if you think it's not very common and affects only a limited population, widespread and far-reaching, or not enough research to know for sure. So as far as the prevalence of abuse goes, whatever you think. And it's challenging conducting research on this because a lot of information on abuse in general is qualitative and anecdotal rather than number-driven. So it's important to remember that there is a difference between the number of reported cases per state versus the prevalence, because we know that domestic violence is one of the most underreported crimes in America. So many folks still believe that, what happens in the home stays in the home, and, domestic violence, there's still a lot of stigma around that, so it is very underreported. So we're still gathering some data. And there's a lot of reasons why it goes unreported. Like I said, many folks still believe that what happens in the home stays in the home. I grew up in a home where, due to my cultural background, the saying was never air your dirty laundry out in public. So I don't know if anyone else, but, so many people still believe this, and it makes it a challenge for a victim to come forward because there is still a lot of stigma associated to it. A lot of people still think it's a family issue, and it's really not. It's a societal issue that it really has a huge impact on society.
Okay, I think we can close that out now.
Yeah. So it looks like most of you checked off that it's widespread and far-reaching. And then some of you checked off not enough research to know for sure. So really, this is kind of like a trick question, because there really is not enough research on economic abuse to know for sure the impact. So I would say it's the third one, but from what we've gathered, we've been able to tell that it is very widespread. So it's sort of both. So I think anyone that answered was pretty correct in their assumptions there. So we'll move forward. So we're just going to touch briefly on some statistics related to specifically to economic abuse, and this is called courtesy of the NCADV website, which is the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They're a great resource for abuse, for like abuse-related information. So the first statistic, up to 99% of domestic violence victims experience economic abuse during an abusive relationship, and finances are often cited as the biggest barrier to leaving an abusive relationship. So let's think about this statistic for a moment. So in the United States, an average of 20 people experience intimate partner violence, IPV, every minute. So that equates to more than 10 million abuse victims annually. So 10 million domestic violence victims annually, more than that actually. And if 99% of these victims are experiencing economic abuse, then it's safe to say that obviously this is a huge problem affecting millions of people every year. So the remainder of stats listed are more employment related, and they're not very precise. You could see like 21 to 60%, so it's not super precise. So it's clear to see that more research needs to be done on this subject of economic abuse and its impacts. I'm just going to focus on a few of these statistics. So we already went over that, but so a survey, hold on, let's go. A survey by the Corporate Alliance to End Partner Violence found that of respondents who are victims and survivors, 64% reported their abuse impacted their ability to work, and 40% reported their abuser harassed them at work via phone and in person. So again, it just speaks to the employment-related abuse and how that can really cause a lot of problems in terms of the victim's employment and self-sufficiency in general. And victims of intimate partner violence lose a total of 8 million days of paid work each year, which is the equivalent of 32,000 jobs, which is definitely an incredible statistic. So what we can see from the very narrow scope and the limited data that we do have points to economic abuse as a huge problem in society, not just for the individual, but on a macro level, really for society and our economy in general. All right, so we're going to go into the impact of financial abuse on its victims. So these are the different ways that financial abuse can impact a victim. So financial abuse can often jeopardize a victim's ability to keep a job. Victims sometimes lose jobs because of absences or related job performance matters. They may need time off to attend a court hearing or seek medical attention, legal assistance or counseling, or find a new place to live, arrange childcare, things like that. And this can all result in job loss, which makes the victim even more financially dependent on the abuser. So as you can see, it's sort of a vicious cycle that's happening there. There are a lot of protections, especially now under the recent laws that have been passed under the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, that protect employees that are dealing with domestic violence. But it's challenging because the supervisor can still find something about their work performance that they don't like and, try to kind of fire them that way. So, I mean, it's challenging to prove, and it still requires, a lot of legal battle back and forth, and a lot of victims don't want to go through that. So a lot of victims, unfortunately, just suffer the job loss and move on. During the abuse, obviously, there's no economic self-sufficiency because you're being completely controlled financially and you have little financial independence. And then after the abuse, victims face massive barriers to economic self-sufficiency, including struggling to find a job or even obtaining a place to live after leaving an abusive relationship due to the coerced debt that we talked about earlier, and its effects on the personal credit scores. So for the cycle of abuse, so economic abuse often keeps the cycle of abuse going. So victims may be unable to leave an abusive partner or may be forced to return to an abusive partner for economic reasons, and therefore continue to experience many forms of abuse. Financial control is the number one reason victims remain in abusive relationships. So the cycle just kind of keeps going. What we know about the effects of trauma is that it brings people from a place of confidence to a place of insecurity and vulnerability. So with that in mind, victims of financial abuse could develop a lot of emotional and psychological responses. For instance, depression, anxiety, PTSD are very common when it comes to victims of abuse. Sleep disturbances, eating disorders, victims of DV or economic abuse are at higher risk for substance abuse and other unhealthy coping mechanisms. Victims can also suffer from what is known as learned helplessness. So what this concept was coined in like the earlier, the earlier women's movement in the 70s, but it's viewed within the context of intimate partner violence, but the same principles can be applied specifically to financial abuse. So what it is it operates off the theory that as control and isolation increases in the relationship, a shift in the victim's comprehension of their situation occurs. So they start to think about their situation differently. There's a belief that their partner is all powerful and that they don't have the ability to survive on their own. They just can't do it. The partner knows everything. They know nothing. And this ties into their self-worth. So over time, if you're hearing over and over again that you can't do any of these things on your own, you can't budget on your own, I do everything because you can't do anything, you're stupid and helpless, then eventually you're going to believe it. And even after the abuse ends, you're going to remain that helpless victim that can't do those things for themselves because that's what you've learned in the relationship. And this especially is true for abusive relationships that happen over a long course of time, like years. We see this a lot. So this is just really highlighting that, a decreased sense of self-worth, which is a belief in your own ability to accomplish goals, coupled with this negative thinking about money, can lead to unhealthy financial behaviors, which is a foundational concept of financial social work for those that are studying in this field, is that your beliefs about yourself and your beliefs about money really relate to how you behave with money, which can have a devastating impact on you long term. So you could see how abuse victims with this low sense of self and this negative belief about money that's already built in with the financial abuse can lead to sort of, unhealthy spending habits, unhealthy saving habits, over time, and even once the abuse has ended. So these are some warning signs and things to look for when you're assessing for financial abuse. So most of these on their own could be harmless and perfectly reasonable, but within the context of that, and it could be reasonable. It's all about context. It's all about the relationship, and you have to kind of know how the relationship is built. But coupled together, it can also be an indicator of financial abuse if you dive a little deeper. So you want to pay special attention to anyone who expresses these things to you, and especially several of these are going on because then it increases the likelihood that economic abuse and control is going on. So we'll just go over some of these. So if someone says to you, I want to work, but he says it's not the right time right now. So what does that mean? What does the right time mean? Maybe it really isn't the right time. Maybe they're just, maybe the other spouse or other person is, doing a lot with their job and they have kids to support and they need one parent to stay home, for the way the household works and they can't afford childcare. Maybe that's one of the reasons. But maybe there's other reasons that maybe don't make a ton of sense. So it's important to dive deeper into this because that's a concerning statement, is that, she wants to work, but he's saying it's not the right time right now. So one person wants it, the other person doesn't. That can create a lot of disconnect. I have a job, but she demands that I hand my paycheck over to her. So this is actually what we said is common for perpetrators, is that they will require the abuser to hand over their entire paycheck. Now, for this one, maybe that works in the context of their relationship. Maybe that's how their relationship works. I know with my parents, my dad works and brings home the money and my mom takes care of it. My mom says, give me the money, deposit it into the account, and I'm going to pay all the bills. I'm going to do everything. And he has his own private money. I mean, that's how they set up their system. That's how they like it. And that's how they both have agreed that it works. So maybe it works for them, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe this person is expressing discomfort with the way it's working. So that's kind of a warning sign. If you see that and you see the person as like saying like, she demands I hand over my paycheck and I'm not happy with that. That's not something that I like. I think he hides money from me, or I hide money from him, so he won't get mad if I buy something. These are definitely big indicators and warning signs that financial abuse is going on. The house is in his name only. So that's not, by itself, that may not be an indicator of financial abuse. That could be because the other person's credit is really bad. So maybe he had to buy the house just so they could get the house. I mean, again, there's a lot of ways that you could kind of, work with, and especially for first-time home buyers, even with like lower credit, there's still a lot of ways that people can get homes, and there's a lot of these programs out there that work on this with people. But a lot of times abusers will use this as an excuse. They'll say, well, you don't have great credit and I do, so we're going to put the house in my name. And it's kind of like they're deciding for the person, so they're kind of saying this is how it's going to go, rather than maybe they've researched it, maybe they've seen if they could do it together as a couple, and it just makes more sense to put it in one person's name. But putting the house in one person's name really opens up to a lot of like potential for control and abuse. So the checkings and savings accounts are in her name only. That's a really common indicator that there might be financial control going on. If I don't spend money, I think we will get along better. I must go to him for everything, even for the money to buy shampoo. This is actually directly from my client. So a lot of these are things that my clients have actually said to me, and things that we experience in the domestic violence field a lot and we hear a lot. I must go to him. Yeah, I don't know how much money he earns or has in the bank. This is really common because abusers like to hide their finances from the victim. They do this so that if the victim does decide to divorce, they can claim bankruptcy. They could claim that they have no money for the victim to take, when in reality they might have things squirreled away in other people's names or in other accounts that they don't have access to. And they, their goal is to kind of leave the victim financially destitute upon divorce, so they're less likely to have a lot of options. They may return to the abuse, or so that's a really big indicator that there might be some control or abuse going on. Very secretive. I can't spend any money without being questioned by her. This is really common with abuse victims. A lot of times they don't even want to bother because they don't want to go through the fight. So they don't want to have an argument every time it comes to they need to spend money on something. He forges my signature on our tax returns or won't allow me to see the tax returns. So that's actually pretty common. So they might say something like, oh, since I'm the one that works for the family, I'm the one who's allowed to see and file the tax returns. So that's simply untrue. That's obviously a myth. Anyone that files a joint return, regardless of who the person is that works, has access to those tax returns. Every time I ask a question about the family finances, it starts an argument. So we went over that. So these are just some warning signs, and then some other warning signs may include sudden changes in spending habits. So these can be for healthy reasons, like trying to decrease their spending, but it should be monitored closely. Any increased isolation that you're noticing on behalf of the client, or if they're being secretive about their home life or finances, and any changes in behavior or demeanor, like are they becoming very anxious, frightened, aggressive, distracted, depressed, things like that. So those are other potential indicators. And again, all of these by themselves may not be financial abuse, but it's just important to pay attention to. So the next step goes into how to initially respond if you suspect financial abuse. So let's just start by saying, it's not your job to provide counseling or safety planning. It's important to leave that to the professionals at your local domestic violence agency, your family justice center, the police. But these are some things that you can do or say when you encounter someone who you believe is a victim of financial abuse. So, and it's really important to use a trauma-informed approach when a victim might reveal that they are a victim to you. So what is a trauma-informed approach? We're not going to go too deep into this, but it's a framework that consists of three main concepts: believe, support, and empower. So you want to let the victim know that you believe what they're telling you. Too often, victims aren't believed when they tell their stories. So you want to make sure that you are sending the message that I believe you when you're telling me this. You want to be an active listener and affirm and validate the person's feelings. And finally, you want to pull from their strengths. They're a survivor, and chances are they have been dealing with this abuse long before you got involved. So just validating their strength and how they've made it through this rough time is really important. So these are just some do's and don'ts when it comes to how to respond to economic abuse. And, so you want to be sure to express concern and let the victim know that you're there to listen rather than ignore the situation and thinking it will go away if you don't talk about it, or do the opposite, which is push the victim to disclose things that they're not comfortable talking about yet or even saying out loud yet. Maybe they have never even said these things out loud or even admitted them to themselves. So you definitely don't want to push the victim, but you also don't want to ignore the situation either. If you notice something, you can simply express your concern. I've been noticing some of these things that have been happening and it's concerning to me, and I want you to know that I'm here for you if you need to talk, and there are resources out there that can help you, and I can help you get connected with them. So, and just kind of leaving it at that and letting them kind of come to you if they want to, and kind of setting them up with a resource or support. But certainly not pushing it, but you can certainly highlight your concerns, and that's important to do. So you want to listen to and believe the victim without judgment, and you don't want to blame the victim or make assumptions about the situation. So like I said before, victims a lot of times go into the system and unfortunately they're not believed. This happens a lot. So you never want to ask the question why a victim would stay in the relationship. I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but there's a lot of great information on, this in terms of like why the victim stays and why we ask this question as a society. The question we really should be asking is, why does this person choose to abuse? So we need to put the responsibility back on the offender. There's some great videos actually on YouTube. If you look up #WhyIStayed on YouTube, you'll get sort of a really, detailed description of that. But, it's important not to blame the victim. So you want to offer your help and support and refer the victim to a victim advocate for more assistance. And we're going to list that on the resource slide on the last page. You don't want to tell the victim what to do or place conditions on your help or support. They're already being controlled enough by the abuser, so they don't need to be controlled by someone who is claiming to help them. That just perpetuates the cycle of control and abuse. So you may think you're helping by saying, I'm not going to see you anymore unless you go to a victim advocate or unless you leave the abuser, but you're actually forcing the victim to choose between a rock and a hard place, and that's really difficult. It can cause even more emotional turmoil for the victim and can lead to them feeling more isolated. So just, just really being supportive and saying we'll support you no matter what, whether you leave or you stay, we're still going to be here to kind of support you, is an important message to send. So this goes into, we're going to go into safety planning. Before we do that, we're going to do a brief poll. So let me just share this here. So the most important thing to consider when financial safety planning is the victim's legal rights in terms of the abuser's finances. The safety plan is unique to the victim and focused on what they want, or the victim's physical safety and level of risk. So what is you think is the most important thing when financial safety planning? So, and when we talk about safety plans, just to kind of break it down, we have safety plans for fires and other disasters, and we also have comprehensive safety plans for victims of abuse, focusing on all aspects of victim safety. So we're going to cover sort of in this portion what a basic financial safety plan should look like and what to consider when helping someone develop a financial safety plan. So this is really the section that we're going to dive into specifically financial safety planning. But obviously, a victim rights center or a victim advocacy center or a family justice center will be able to do more comprehensive safety planning with a victim, and that's definitely something that I would encourage you to refer clients to, because they can really create a safety plan that's unique to them and that takes all of the client's concerns into account and is very comprehensive and detailed, so that the victim can feel more prepared in any circumstance in their lives, in any situation, whether they're staying in a relationship or trying to leave the relationship.
Okay, I think we can close.
So we're still collecting some responses, so we'll close it. So a lot of you said the most important thing is that the safety plan is unique to the victim and focused on what they want, 59% of you. And then 38% said the victim's physical safety and the level of risk is most important. And then 4% said the legal rights. So these are all equally important, I think, when it comes to financial safety planning, and we're all going to go over sort of why that is. But really, you know, although like all these other things are crucial to financial safety planning, the victim's physical safety must come first. So if at any time the victim feels that they're in danger, do not wait to organize your finances, do not wait to collect your valuables or call your lawyer. Get out immediately or call 911 or the police or your local domestic violence program, because there are domestic violence shelters set up all across the nation to be able to assist victims. So it's important to remember this, and a lot of people don't think this when they're dealing with financial abuse, but financial abuse can get ugly very quickly. We have to remember that the whole reason why financial abuse is happening is because the abuser has a need to control and have power over their victim. So what happens when they notice that that control is slipping? Maybe the victim is starting to snoop into the finances. Maybe the victim is trying to get more empowered. Maybe they're losing control. So that can become very desperate very quickly, and that can escalate to physical abuse in a split second. So it's very important to remember that physical safety is paramount. Always, when any type of abuse is considered, you want to consider the victim's physical safety and their level of risk for any physical violence happening. So we're going to go into sort of what a plan looks like. So some things to consider when we think about safety planning is that...
Excuse me, Marisa?
Sorry. Yep.
Did you close the poll because we're not able to see
Oh, I'm
your
so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
You think it's closed now? Is it closed now?
Well, it's closed, but did you go to a new slide?
Yeah, I'm on special considerations.
You can't see that, Vonda, right? I can't see it either.
No, I'm not able to see your slides now.
Can you see it now?
Yikes. No.
Huh.
I don't know why this is happening. Hold on one second.
I don't think it's your phone. Share. Hide. Why don't you go ahead and just go through the information? And I'm trying to see if we can do something, but it's not working. Just share your information. That's pretty much what people want.
Okay.
Well, Rita, is there a way that Marisa can hand it back? Do you have her slides up on your?
I can get them up. All right, Marisa.
Yeah, and then that way.
Yeah, I'll walk you through that.
Yeah, so we'll just change presenter. Sorry about this, everyone. Technical difficulties. It happens.
Technical difficulties. You see the change presenter, Marisa?
Yeah, I'll do that now. So change it to you, Rita?
Right. And I'll see if I can put up your slides. Okay. Well, there are my slides. I guess I have to say yes, but I need to escape my slides and put up your slides, which is a great idea, Vonda. And there you go, Marisa. But how do I get through your slides? Okay, what slide are you on here?
Special considerations, which is, which one is that? I don't know the number. I think it's
32? Huh?
She done the
26.
last poll, so it's got to be
26.
26,
26.
Rita.
Okay, here we are, everybody.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. So the first thing to consider when financial safety planning is that every plan is unique to the victim. We want to make sure that everyone's lives are different, so it wants to be tailored to fit their individual needs. And victims are the best resource to understand the potential risk that the abuser poses to them and to their children. So the safety plan really should be focused on what the victim wants to address and not what another person might feel is the best choice. It's really all about giving victims choices and options and going over the potential positive and negative outcomes of each option and really letting the victim arrive at the choice that's best for them. And it's important not to overwhelm the victim with more than they can handle. Even small steps towards financial freedom will help the victim to feel more confident that they can cope on their own and help restore some hope that they can become self-sufficient in the future. So small steps are really important. And then we went over that physical safety comes first. So we go to the next slide.
Oh, whoops.
So we're going to just break down the 3 stages, and I'll go over this really briefly because I know we're running out of time. So the 3 stages of safety planning are safety during abuse, safety upon leaving, and safety after the abuse. So safety during abuse, there's different things that can be done, and a lot of these things can be done across multiple stages. But so safety during abuse, a victim can open a separate bank account in their name or out of the abuser's name, try to squirrel away some money little by little, either in a separate bank account, at a friend's house, in your car, somewhere you'll have access to it, as a last resort. Keep a small bag packed with essentials like extra clothing, medication, toiletries. The most important thing with financial safety planning is having copies of important documents collected together in a safe place. So a safe place can mean a lot of different things to a lot of victims. Some people get a safety deposit box at a bank, and that you pay to rent it. It costs like $20 to $40 a year annually usually. You could keep the documents at a friend's home, you could keep them at work, or you could keep them with your victim advocate at the local victim advocate office. And a list of these documents can be found in one of your handouts. The NCADV's Financial DV Rebuilding Guide that I include for you has really comprehensive financial safety planning in there and a lot of tools for rebuilding after financial abuse. So it's a really great resource to have, and it is included in your handouts. So,
Oops. Did I go too fast, Marisa?
yeah, no, this is fine. So a lot of victims may choose to set up a PO box. They're very low cost that you pay usually on an annual basis at the post office, and you could set it up in a town you don't necessarily live in. Many abusers, will try to steal the documents that come in or try to look through the victim's mail, and obviously the victim wants to make sure that their mail is staying safe, especially if they request documents get mailed to them. So it's important to kind of get them sent to a safer location. Many abusers will hide records or money from their victims and claim they're broke when they go to court. So you explained that earlier. So a victim can consider legal help to uncover or freeze the assets, either by hiring a lawyer or sometimes a forensic accountant. But these can be very expensive, extremely expensive. So there's a lot of nonprofit agencies that are set up. I know for us, we're a justice center, and we have civil legal services on site that a victim can use if they're dealing with divorce, custody issues, and things of this nature. But it can be very expensive to sort of uncover these assets because you're paying in a lawyer or this forensic accountant to do it, and it requires a lot of digging. Sometimes you as the victim, or the victim has to get creative and do a little digging on their own. So perhaps when the abuser's not home, but it's important to note that An abuser can respond with violence if they know you're searching for the records, so never put yourself in jeopardy trying to locate the records. But a lot of victims may choose to do some digging on their own if it's safe to do that. It's not always. So we don't want to encourage anything that's unsafe for the victim to do. We can go to the next slide.
Skip this one?
No, so the safety upon leaving, slide 29. So yeah, this is fine. So we want to, the most important thing is to encourage victims to work with a victim's advocate. Like we said, they can develop a safety plan for leaving. And you can provide them with the emergency hotline numbers. Every agency that's set up in the nation has emergency statewide domestic violence hotline numbers. I listed on the last slide the national domestic violence hotline number and some of the national hotline numbers, and then they kind of filter you in through the state that you're in. So they'll filter clients to where they need to go. And you want to identify support systems in the victim's life, family, friends, coworkers, people that can help them when they're trying to leave an abusive relationship. Encourage the victim to speak with a lawyer about financial, divorce, or custody issues. That's really important because the laws differ in every state when it comes to divorce and division of assets and things like that. So on the next slide, which is slide 30, yeah, so we want to avoid using, avoid using credit or debit cards that the abuser can track. They might change PIN numbers or passwords on all their online accounts, close joint accounts, or have your name removed from the abuser's accounts, and transfer a portion. So some victims choose to do this. They transfer a portion of the joint account money into a private savings account right before they leave. Now, the problem with this is you should consult with an attorney first before doing this, because you could be held liable for that money if you end up going to court. The abuser could try to say, well, that's my money, blah, blah, blah. So if you're going to do this, you want to keep it in the account. Try not to spend it, but just keep it in the separate account. Only take your portion of like whatever. If you worked and you like contribute some to the account, take half or something like that. But you want to be cautious about this because it could open you up to liability later on in a court case. So you definitely want to consult with an attorney first. But some victims choose to do this because their abusers will often empty their bank accounts when the victim leaves, so the victim has no resources and no way of kind of staying financially stable. So a lot of times the victim will head that off by taking out some of the money in advance.
Marisa, we are at 3
Yeah, we're out of time. Okay. So can I just wrap up just really quickly? So the other slides just go more into financial restoration, which is like more safety after abuse, and that's all in your the handout, the rebuilding guide. So you can get a lot of that covered in the handout. And a lot of the last couple of slides are really just kind of resources, and again, I created a handout for that. So you should also have a handout that's a one-page handout that gives you all the resources for economic abuse. It gives you specifically abuse resources, the numbers for victims to call, and then it gives you like some financial resources. And then the last slide is my information. Like I said, we're a justice center, so we provide co-located services on site for victims of abuse, including counseling, legal support, things like that. And there are justice centers set up all across the nation. It's really a best practice model for serving victims of domestic violence. This is just our center's information, but if you're looking for a center that's in your state, you want to contact the NCADV's national hotline, which I listed on one of the previous slides. So you could definitely get the information for your state.
Well, Marisa,
so thank you so much. I'm sorry. I know that's so much information for everyone, and I really appreciate everyone for sticking with it.
Well, we had a really wonderful attendance, and we all appreciate you. And in a minute, I'll show you, if you haven't figured out where to get your handouts, I'll show you where to get them. I did want to remind you or tell you about, we have a special event on Thursday, November 7th, less than a month, and it is on client-centered financial wellness that works. It's why I did that first poll question, because I've been doing this for over 22 years, and over that period, we know what works and we know what clients need to really take control of their money and gain control of their lives. And we're going to have giveaways at that webinar. You can go to our website at financialsocialwork.com and click on resources and register after we finish today. Right over in your rectangular box at the upper right-hand corner, there is a place where you can download Marisa's amazing and wonderful, really terrific handouts. Thank you so much, Marisa, not only for your great presentation, but for all of those wonderful handouts also. And
No problem.
well, we appreciate it. And so quickly, this is about our certification. It is self-study and self-paced. Marisa did a wonderful job describing it at the beginning of the webinar. We appreciate that, Marisa. Our students have 6 months to complete it, and there's an online final exam that students have 2 weeks to complete. And you can read about that on our website also. And it includes 20 CEUs, and graduates may use the certification materials one-on-one with their clients. So, you have some time for Q&A, Marisa?
Yeah.
Okay. Wanda, what do you have for us? And Wanda is
Oh.
here now. She's my assistant. Thanks for being here, Wanda.
Oh, you're welcome, Rita. Let's start with this question. If it's hidden, concealed, and easy to hide, how do we detect? Are there certain questions we could ask if we sense there is a problem, or is that off limits?
Oh, so like as far as like asking questions. So I mean, I think, like we explained, I think it's really if you're and referring back to the warning sign slide, I think it's important to kind of, if you see some signs, it's okay to say, I'm noticing this, and maybe asking some questions to kind of delve deeper into like how that's happening. So you don't want to ask too many leading questions, but just, it's okay to ask some open-ended questions like, to express concern. You don't want to push the victim or push someone into disclosing more than they're comfortable with. So, I guess you just kind of pay attention to their nonverbal and verbal cues, if they're kind of, taking a while to answer, if they're feeling fidgety, or they're kind of not really making eye contact, or not really too quick to disclose. Maybe just kind of table it, but just kind of express, like you say, just to express, I noticed some of these things, and we just want to make sure that you're, in a safe situation. And, if you're not, we're here to kind of give you some options and resources, and we can refer you to the right place. So, just kind of letting them know that you're a resource, and if they want to come to you, they can. But it's hard. It's hard to kind of, that's why it's so hidden, is because, a lot of victims don't want to come forward. A lot of victims, number one, don't even recognize this as a form of abuse. It's still very recent that the field of abuse is even gravitating towards this, but
Very recent.
it's very recent,
Too recent.
especially, and even with the DV movement, the domestic violence movement, it's very recent that economic abuse is even being considered as like a form of abuse, but it's really devastating because it is so hidden. So a lot of people don't talk about money, it's just one of those things. Like, people don't like to talk about it in general.
Right.
So it's hard to kind of get people to especially disclose something like this. But, the important thing is no pressure and just support. So, you could ask some questions like, can you give me an example? Or, like some open-ended questions, and that's okay. But if you sense that the victim is holding back, then don't push. So I think that's the best advice that I can give. And, the victim will come forward when they feel safe and comfortable with you.
Next question, Vaughn.
We meet with a high number of participants who have been victims of DV, domestic violence. They don't always recognize the economic abuse that they endured and the lasting effects. I'm anxious to learn how to help them recognize, acknowledge, and take steps to heal. Financial abuse being the longest lasting abuse, that was an eye opener. So that was more of a comment.
Yeah.
And let's see.
Yeah, I
How much
appreciate
would
that.
you
I mean,
say? Yeah, I figured you would. I think that financial abuse is probably one of the I don't know. Anyway,
yeah,
how
and
much
it's
would
hard
you?
to get victims to recognize that. It is hard. I mean, victims are focused on a lot of other things, but when you think about it, a victim after they leave an abusive situation, a lot of the things that they're focused on is self-sufficiency, is rebuilding. So a lot of this is tied into economic abuse and the lasting impact. So, I mean, I definitely think, maybe even going over types of like parts of this presentation and giving them information about economic abuse. And there's a lot of information that you can find off the NCADV website, which is the National Coalition's website against domestic violence. And, just a lot of great materials, handouts, things like that. I included some handouts, but, I definitely think education about financial abuse, there's nothing wrong with just kind of giving them some information, especially if they have been victims, to get them to kind of see. But it's up to the victim, of course, like what they want to address at the time. But, a lot, like you said, a lot of victims don't always recognize this as a form of abuse.
Vonda,
Marissa, did you say that domestic violence was the most underreported crime, or was it the
No, it's one of
financial
the most. It's
abuse?
definitely not the most underreported crime. Domestic violence in general is underreported. Any really type of abuse is. Financial abuse is also very underreported. So it's like so it's like sort of a subset. Domestic violence is the large overreaching topic, and then financial abuse is a subset. But domestic violence in general, including financial abuse, is underreported. It's not the most underreported, so I don't have statistics to back that up. Please don't quote me, but it is very underreported.
well, it's underreported because it's underrecognized. But I
Yes.
see some questions, Vonda, about elder abuse and financial abuse. And actually, my mom was a victim of that. And a few people here are asking about how to use it with the issue of elder abuse. I do want to point out that a year or so ago, we did do a webinar on elder financial abuse, and that is on our YouTube channel. I don't know if you want to address that at all.
Yeah, definitely. So the reason why I didn't really address it too much in this presentation is because there's a lot of information actually out there on elder financial abuse. Most of the information about financial abuse that's out there is targeted towards the elderly, because that's traditionally how people thought of financial abuse. Is the elderly are very commonly the most common targets for this abuse. There's a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of people scamming the elders, which is a big issue. But then there's also their caregivers. There's a lot of times it's the people you last expect. It's their son,
Yes,
their daughter, their spouse,
or
their
hired
caretaker.
caregivers. Believe me, I could
Exactly.
attest to that. But I saw an article in the past day or two about millennials being scammed, which shouldn't have surprised me. But then I may have tweeted it actually. It went on to talk about elder abuse too. It, you know, there's really bad people out
Yeah,
there.
it's really a huge problem, and especially in society just in general. I mean, you just want to be careful of identity theft because it's really everywhere. And especially with
uh,
elders, it's very common.
oh,
Elders and
yes.
children, actually, a lot of people don't think this, but children are a huge target for identity theft.
Yep. Yep.
And a lot of times it's their family members, which is awful. But, I mean, there's been cases that we've seen where one of our victims actually that we worked with, her son, who just found out, like, he graduated from high school and he's going to college and he's getting ready to go off to college, and he tries to get a loan, like, to co-sign with the mom, and then comes to see that he has a destroyed credit rating. He's like, "What are you talking about? I just got my first credit card." It turns out that the abuser, the ex-husband, was using all of his, like, social security number to open fraudulent accounts. He had, like, so many credit cards and collections, like, on his account. I don't know how the credit card companies didn't recognize this, but it's very common that perpetrators or offenders will use the child's information for identity theft.
Oh,
So that happens a lot.
it gets even worse than that, but we don't have time to go into it. But everyone should be
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much.
should be checking their child's social number. They really should. It happens a lot with when children age out of foster care too, Marissa.
Yes. Mhm.
Here's a
Very
woman
common.
that shares with us that she has a client whose boyfriend made her take cash loans, and when she broke up and tried to collect, he filed a restraining order. Well, what a surprise. Uh,
Yeah.
oh
It doesn't
gosh,
surprise me. I mean,
nothing.
but he filed a restraining order for, like, taking money?
Well, she was going
I don't know.
after him. She was going after him. Um,
Oh, okay. All right.
uh, listen, there's a bunch more questions, and I appreciate everyone attending today and asking these great questions. I hope you can see somebody said that they didn't know where to find the handouts because they're really terrific handouts. There should be a spot at the right in that rectangle up in the corner that tells you where to click there, and you can download those handouts. Go ahead and get them because we just have to kind of wrap this up. Some people are thanking you, Marissa, as I thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you. And I really appreciate being here today and sharing this information. It's so important to really raise awareness about this issue, and it's a passion of ours here at the center. So any people that we can reach and help, we're definitely willing and always able to kind of support you as professionals and also victims. So feel free, as a professional, to call me if you have, or email me if you have any specific questions, or if you need more information. And definitely send victims to our hotline. Is a great resource for them to get the help that they need. So we're happy to help in any way that we can.
Thank you again. Thanks everyone for attending. I hope we'll see you back here on November 7th for our important launch. And have a beautiful rest of the day, everyone. Thanks. Bye now. I'm going to end this. And, oh, file.